listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Yes, Myra's still away. She is planning on being back, hopefully, and I say that, hopefully, first part of next week. So she might be here next Monday. She might not. So I'm kind of hoping she is anyway. If you happen to be new here, typically my wife joins me and when we're doing this, and a lot of people enjoy having her here. I know I do. So, before I get started today, the website, givegod90.com, if you haven't been there lately, go ahead and head over that way when you're done. I know a lot of people actually listen to the podcast through that, so we appreciate that. Don't forget the books are still available and all that good stuff. If you've been watching the news, you know what's going on in Israel, kind of, depending on what newscast you watch. Okay, I'll put it that way. Western news media is not doing a lot of justice to it. It's, when it first happens, it's a big news event and everybody wants to know what's going on. And, now we're a week into it and the operations part of it is happening. And there's not a lot of, while there's a lot of activity, a lot of action going on, what you don't see is the day-to-day things that occur when something like this happens. So there's not a whole lot of course, the last update I had was just a little while ago. So unless something's happened in the last few hours that I don't know about, then there's not a whole lot more to go into with that. Excuse me. Something that crossed my path not long ago, and it it can be infuriating if you are a strong believer. It can be aggravating if you are a casual believer. When we look at various worship communities today, we see things that just should not be happening. I had this conversation with a friend of mine just the other day about a couple of different things. We see pastors inviting drag exhibitions so that these folks can read Bible stories to children. We see pastors who allow secular fundraising events during a regular church service, by the way. Something I talk about often is pastors that are standing up there preaching things that are contrary to the Bible. And, it's not always the pastors that are doing this. Other church leaders, we see concerts, or I've heard of concerts happening in church services where absolutely no worship music is played whatsoever. It's all secular music. Certain churches have fun days, right? They have Sunday Fun Day, where the services are just ignored. The Creator is completely ignored. And they have other events. Something I've learned about recently that just kind of got under my skin, and it made me start thinking about these things. There was a church that actually hosted during its church service, it hosted a voodoo exhibition. Now, I wasn't there, but I can say, unless you're going to speak against it, you don't want to be showing it to the people that you're supposed to be protecting that kind of stuff from. And I don't want anybody to think that, enjoying yourself shouldn't be happening, right? It's perfectly fine if a church wants to sponsor a carnival. It's perfectly fine if a worship community wants to have these special events, these concerts and that kind of thing. That's no problem. But why would you do it instead of or in place of having if you're going to have a traditional service where the sacred word of the Creator is explained, then do that. But don't ignore the Almighty in place of your regular service. And I want to point out and be specific that these things are occurring in lieu of, in place of, a typical worship service, what many would consider a worship service. Now, I cannot imagine, and it's amazing. I just can't imagine someone having a voodoo exhibition in the building where people are supposed to gather to glorify our Creator, when He says, don't do that. He says, if it's anything that I say and you're bringing something against it, don't do it. And then I'm often reminded, I am very often reminded, especially by Christians, well, Jesus ate with sinners. And yes, that is recorded in the New Testament. Matthew 9 through 13, for example. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting in a tax booth. Follow me, he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. Later, as Jesus was dining at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing that, where did I find that? On hearing that, Jesus said, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. Now go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Comes straight out of Samuel, by the way. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Now that event can also be found in Mark chapter 2, Luke chapter 5, if you wanted a little different perspective on it. But a little later on, in Luke chapter 7, an interesting meal occurs. Verses 36 through 43. One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to eat with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a sinful woman from town learned that Jesus was dining there, she bought an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wipe them off with her hair. Then she kissed his feet and anointed them with perfume. When the Pharisees who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She is a sinner. Now, I want to pause right here. The Pharisees, watch yourselves so that you do not lose what you have worked for, but that you may be fully rewarded. Anyone who runs ahead without remaining in the teaching of the Messiah, of Yeshua, does not have God. Whoever remains in his teaching has both the Father and the Son. Anyone who remains in his teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you but does not bring this teaching, do not receive him into your home or even rejoice with him. Whoever rejoices with such a person shares in his evil deeds. Now we got to unpack a little bit here. John is being specific about what people will be teaching. Now, I could go down a rabbit trail here about, John saying, if these people are saying that Yeshua, Jesus, wasn't born, that was where he's concentrating on. He doesn't talk about the resurrection, and that's a long rabbit trail. And if you've ever chased a rabbit, you know that they eventually come back around, right? So I'm not going down that rabbit trail. That's for another time. When Yeshua went to a sinner's house, he was doing exactly the opposite of what John is describing. He was doing precisely the opposite of what John's describing. He wasn't there to rejoice with them. And by the way, most Bible translations in English will use the word greet. And in today's language, it means, you're not even supposed to say hello to these folks, right? That's what we would take it to mean today. But that's not what it says in the Greek. It actually says to rejoice. When somebody comes to your house and they are not a believer, you don't party their way. You party your way. It's your house. You don't allow someone to bring sin into your house. I could go down a lot of rabbit trails with that too, but I won't. Yeshua did not go to these places to rejoice with sinners. When he went there, he was the example. Now, he was in someone else's house. He didn't go there bringing sin. He went there bringing the word of the Father. Yeshua himself says, I came to teach the word. I came to deliver my Father's doctrine. Depends on what translation you read. He was there to show them how they should be concentrating on the Creator when they get together. Yes, he did sit down with sinners, but he was not tempted by their sin. He did not allow their sin to become his sin. He didn't choose to take part in their games, right? But he also didn't start preaching at them right away. He didn't walk in and say, oh, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that wrong. He went in, he was himself, and when they asked, see, he let them start the conversation. Then he gave them what the Father gave him to say. Why is that important? Well, when we choose to get together with other folks, yes, it should be with other believers whenever possible. Right? Now, obviously, Yeshua, Jesus, didn't make a habit of continually associating with sinners. But when he did, he did not allow their sin to become his sin. He didn't allow the things they were doing to affect him. He made a very wise choice. That's important. Proverbs 12:26. A righteous man is cautious in friendship, but the ways of the wicked lead them astray. Yeshua was very, very cautious. He was careful with whom he spent the most time with. He was careful to choose his friends. He was careful to choose those who were faithful. Think about that. The churches I mentioned earlier, are they cautious about who they let in? Are they careful about who they let in? You know, we could go to Jude and look at that, right? Jude said there will be people who come in and they will lead you astray. But let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2, beginning in verse 17. Excuse me. Those false teachers are like rivers that have no water. They are like clouds blown by a storm. A place in the blackest darkness that has been kept for them. They brag with words that mean nothing. By their evil desires, they lead people into the trap of sin. They lead away people who are just beginning to escape from other people who live in error. They promise freedom, but they themselves are not free. They are slaves of things that will be destroyed and that will destroy them. For a person is a slave of anything that controls him. Exactly what we're seeing in too many places of worship today. You know, people come in, they talk a good talk, but that talk is empty, it's meaningless. Pastors are supposed to be leading, but they are deceived by the world. Other church leaders are taken in by whatever their desire might be, whatever the cause of their desire is. And it's sad. It's sad. And it's sad because they have talked themselves into being innocent because they think they're building the body of Christ in the Christian church, when what they're actually doing is establishing the synagogue of Satan by allowing a voodoo demonstration to take place among a group of believers. They're deceived by the unholy spirits when they allow drag performers to tell Bible stories. Remember Deuteronomy 22:5? Woman must not wear men's clothing, a man must not wear women's clothing. For whoever does these things is detestable to Jehovah, your God. You see, worship communities that do these things are in direct conflict with the Almighty himself. And the Bible makes it abundantly clear, when you're not standing with the Creator, you're standing against the Creator. An interesting passage in 2 Chronicles 20, beginning in verse 5. Excuse me. Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of Jehovah in front of the new courtyard and said, Jehovah, God of our fathers, are you not the God who is in heaven? And do you not rule over all the kingdoms of all the nations? Power and might are in your hand, and no one will stand against you. You see, your chances of survival when you stand against the Creator, they're not slim to none. They don't even exist. You have no chance if you rebel or reject the Creator of the universe. Yes, He is fair and righteous, but the fact remains that He will have the last word. It is He who will judge you. It is He who will decide your fate. And you have a choice. You have a choice of who you will eat with. You have a choice of how you will glorify the Creator at that meal. And you also have the choice of whether you will take part in the sin that may be brought in. And that choice is yours. You have the choice when choosing friends. Will you choose wisely and carefully, or will you allow yourself to be fooled by empty words? You have the choice. I encourage you to choose wisely. Now, a lot of folks might be offended by the things I've just said, and that's okay. Be offended, but know why. Know the reason why. There are folks out there who claim that they represent the Almighty. They claim that they stand for the Bible, when the reality is they're standing against it. You have a choice. You can either stand with them and stand against the Creator, or you can walk away. And that's very, very hard sometimes. Believe me, I know. I've done it. But it's up to you. The choice is yours. So I'll let you think about that until Thursday. And until then, many, many blessings, everyone.